The Philippines, an archipelago nation consisting of over 7,000 islands, located in the Pacific Ocean of Southeast Asia. These islands were not always united under one flag. In 1521, the Spanish began their conquest to colonize and unite the islands under the Spanish crown, showing no regard for the already thriving indigenous peoples and cultures. Upon the Spanish arrival, they named these islands Las Islas de los Pintados, translating to the Islands of the Painted People, due to the abundance of tattooed people found throughout the islands. Later being named after the Spanish King Philip II. After nearly 400 years of Spanish occupation and enforcement of Eurocentric values, many of the indigenous practices were demonized and erased, including a very important practice known as batok, or tattooing. To this day, it is rare to see people in the Philippines wearing ancestral tattoos. Most Filipinos still carry the stigmas of the past with them, often viewing tattoos as unprofessional and associating them with a life of crime. Most recently, Filipinos from around the world have found a renewed desire to reconnect and revive the lost practices of their ancestors. There are very few batok practitioners left in the world. Located in Las Vegas, one practitioner is doing his best to teach the ways of batok to the next generation so that the practice may never be lost again.
My name is Lane Wilkin, and I am a cultural tattooist of the Philippines traditions. Batok, or cultural tattooing in the Philippines, has been a part of the cultures of the Philippines for at least 4,000 years, if not older. It is a very important part of our culture that has, unfortunately, over the last few centuries been lost due to colonization. But it is important for our people to receive their markings. Anciently, these markings, their primary purpose was to prepare you for the next life so that your ancestors would recognize you when you passed on. In effect, it kind of marks you to them. Some of the other purposes of batok are to acknowledge a person's role within the community, their relationship to the community, their ancestry, and their responsibility to both the living and the dead. Well, my interest in the practice started when I was about 19 years old, and I was living in Hawaii and saw the tattooing of our Polynesian cousins, and I was very interested in that, but of course I didn't want to appropriate anything that wasn't mine, so that was the beginning of my education. It wasn't until I was in my 40s that I actually started practicing batok. My path to becoming a practitioner was, it was an interesting path. It entailed me receiving my own marks first, and I wanted to have my first marks hand tapped on me, just the way that our ancient ones had their markings. And so I sought out Sua Isaiah Toitu'u, who is in Hawaii, he's based in Hawaii, and he has been titled by the Samoan Suluwape family as a Tufunga Tatau. But when I went down for my appointment, he had his master, Sua Aleava'a Suluwape, unexpectedly came to tattoo there in Southern California. And so out of respect for his master, he was only stretching for him. He wasn't doing any tattooing. And I was a little disheartened, but then Sua Aleava'a sat with me and we talked for a while, and he decided that he wanted to tattoo me with Filipino designs. And as far as I know, that was the first time he ever tattooed anything that was distinctly Filipino. And that piece was put on my leg from my knee up to my hip. Even at that time, I had no intention of becoming a practitioner. I wanted to learn about it. I wanted to receive markings, but it wasn't until 2012 when my father was diagnosed with cancer, and they wanted to tattoo the radiation targets on his body, and he didn't want somebody he didn't know touching him or marking him. And he asked me, he said, "Lane, you've been studying tattooing for all these years. You tattoo these radiation targets on me." And I couldn't deny my dying father. And so I made a very simple tool with a lemon thorn from my mom's tree. A couple of wooden dowels, pushed that needle through a hole in one of the dowels, got some India ink, and my brother John stretched, and we tattooed those radiation targets on my dad, and that was the first time I ever tattooed. There are other purposes to tattooing, everything from marking lineage, ancestry, a person's particular role in the community, as well as even medicinally. There are medicinal uses of tattooing, kind of like permanent acupuncture. We know that in the Cordillera, Apo Huang Od, our eldest practitioner, she has done several medicinal tattoos, and I've seen them for myself. And they're usually just little dots over a particular area. And the principle behind it is very similar to acupuncture. And so the principle behind acupuncture is that the acupuncturist inserts a little metal needle into the body at an access point that stimulates an organ system. And then using the electromagnetic field of their own body that you might call chi or ki, other places like in India they might call it prana, in the Pacific we call it mana, using their own electromagnetic field, and I'm being very basic here, they stimulate that needle, which is electrically conductive. When we tattoo, we are putting a black dot over that particular area. Every time that it's exposed to sunlight, it's just like wearing a black shirt. It's going to absorb solar energy. So it permanently stimulates that particular point on the body. If you look at the bodysuits that are found in the Visayas, a lot of the time those lines along the body follow meridian lines in the body. It shows that we had a knowledge of that a long time ago. Unfortunately, in Western culture, we are very quick to dismiss indigenous knowledge ways and systems. We need to instill more value in our indigenous ways of doing things. the words of my teacher, Suluape Kione, there are not many things you can do in this life where you can have that same experience that your ancestors had hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And this is a very visceral experience, to have those markings done in the same way with the same types of implements that your ancestors had. So it's a very humbling position I get put in to facilitate bringing back these markings for our people. There's a lot of knowledge that has to go into that. I did research for over 20 years before I even began tattooing. And, but I think the greatest aspect of my education was how rewarding it felt to recover these practices. It's almost like those on the other side of the veil were waiting for somebody to do it. I don't know. In the right way, you know? Because for most of us, especially in the diaspora, we don't have those experiences. You know? At its heart, this is a spiritual practice. The markings that we put on our bodies represent those old ones. They are their markings, they're not mine. This isn't my expression of my artistic ability. This isn't me, you know, trying to do art. It's a very heavy task to try and live up to that legacy. I don't take it lightly. With every recipient that comes through, we do all the protocols that we know that were part of the practice in the old days. And you feel their presence when you tattoo. You feel their guidance when you tattoo. When we work, sometimes the room feels very hot, as if it's full of people. That those on the other side rejoice when their descendants get marked again. And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects of doing batok, is that you get to be with your ancestors, both symbolically and spiritually, and in my opinion, literally. You are their descendant. You know? They live on through you. Their markings live on through us. It's part of our history that once put on, it's very hard to remove. Good job, everybody.